Let's continue now with our conversation. Tex, we are all moved profoundly by your message, and of course, your sharing the tragic death of your 17-year-old son, Stephen, on a motorcycle. Your dialogue with God was ragingly angry, but you were also able to come to grips with this terrible struggle and reality out of the framework of your faith. What works for people, or what words do you use for people who do not have faith or say things like, I've lost my faith?
Well, I don't know what the words are. They come up in strange times. It seems to help with people who lose children, for example, to know that you've also lost a son or a daughter. And in our case, I often will tell that story simply because there will be people inevitably in a room or an auditorium where I'm speaking who fairly recently lost a child, or perhaps a spouse or whatever. And it seems to help them to come over and see somebody who survived it. I've even had people say that, your son died how long ago? And I say 17 years. And they say, well, and you're surviving? And I say, oh yeah, I'm surviving. In fact, let me say one other piece about that. I think, too, part of the thing that God does in loving us, and that's what I would say, I think God's grace is what is so powerfully operative there. I think one of the dangers of losing somebody that close to you is you take on the identity of a victim, so that you become a person who's lost a son, in our case. And that kind of seeing yourself as a victim, I believe, means not only that the grief work has not been done, but that the conversation with God needs to go farther. Because you see, if your identity is all in being the victim of a death, then you really haven't gone on. Now, I miss Steve. I will always miss Steve. I don't ever want to get over him. It is like an amputation,
A dismemberment.
It heals, yeah. But the vacancy, it's not there. But there is a sense in which, too, there's a warmth about Steve and good memories about Steve. And you can cherish those without making loss your identity as a person.
Well, I'm curious to pick up on what Lydia said. You study American culture and lifestyles, and I've always been interested in people that don't have an active faith life or a faith that they turn to. What do you find that people turn to in these times of suffering if they're not plugged into some faith?
Well, I think there are two things. One would be that they turn to friends or people they're close to. And I don't think there's any way to get around the power of having people surround you and enable you to make it through that night. So that's very important. You see, what I believe is that God acts whether people believe in God or not. Mm-hmm. So I would argue that no one gets through these times without God, but they may not be aware of that God is actively loving them through those times.
Our viewers, many of them right now listening to this program, are suffering or know people who have suffered the death of a loved one or whose cancer is back. What's the first step in learning to trust the journey?
Yeah. Well, one thing I don't want to do is to trivialize suffering, or to argue that suffering is always good. Suffering sometimes destroys people, and it can certainly distort a life. But in terms of a first step in dealing with it, I would think facing into it is a very important piece. Getting past that denial. And yes, your son is dead, or yes, I have cancer, or yes, this. My mother used to say to us, taught us this many times, lean into the pain. She didn't mean enjoy pain. She didn't mean be compulsive about it, but she meant don't run from it. Don't hide from it. face into it, lean into it, know it's there, deal with it. So I think that helps. In other words, don't escape into some kind of illusions or fantasies or distortions. Face into how angular and bad and difficult things can be.
And I love what you said about accessing that rage. I think a lot of us are afraid when we're suffering to really yell out at God. You found that to be very helpful for you. How about for other people?
I think, well, I had the benefit of some great teachers. And one of the things they taught me was that raging at God was a form of prayer. Now, if you do that all the time, there may be some other things going on.
Right.
But I think raging at God is a form of prayer.
And is that a place to put the pain and the panic?
Sometimes. Sometimes you put the panic and the pain in the panic and the pain. Rage can be a way of deflecting yourself away from the pain. You know, rage can be a way of, instead of being hurt, you're angry. So sometimes you really need to be hurt and know you're hurt. You know what I mean? But sometimes I think you just need the rage. You just need to blow that out of there.
We have a moment left, Tex, but who helped you most in seminary or growing up, whatever, in your journey to come to this kind of sensibility?
Well, Peter Bertocci helped me a lot, obviously. Walter Milder was immensely helpful to me. Paul Dietz, Howard Thurman, the dean of the chapel at Boston University. Those people were great helps. The faculty at St. Paul's School of Theology was an enormous help to me during that time.
Thank you very much, Tex, for sharing your thoughts with us and your great insights.